The Tunnel Beneath Route 66, an original mystery story. Route 66 was known as the Mother Road. For decades, it carried dreamers across America. Families in station wagons, truckers chasing sunrise, musicians with guitars in the back seat, young couples looking for a new life in California. The highway passed through deserts, diners, motels, gas stations, ghost towns, and long, empty stretches where the sky seemed bigger than the earth. But near a forgotten town in Arizona, there was 1 mile of Route 66 that locals never drove after midnight, because beneath that road, there was a tunnel no map had ever shown. Mason Cole first heard about the tunnel from his grandfather. He was a travel photographer, driving the old highway for a book about forgotten America. Most people photographed neon signs and abandoned motels. Mason liked quieter things: broken pumps, dusty windows, empty roads at sunset. His grandfather had once driven trucks along Route 66 in the 1960s. Before Mason left, the old man handed him a faded Polaroid. It showed a desert road beneath a pale moon. In the center of the road was an open hatch. A staircase led down into darkness. On the back, his grandfather had written, "If you find mile 214, do not go below." Mason should have ignored it. But mystery has a way of turning warnings into invitations. 3 weeks later, he reached a nearly abandoned town called Redwater. Only a diner, a gas station, and a motel still operated. When Mason showed the Polaroid to the motel owner, her smile disappeared. "That road's closed." "Why?" "Sinkholes." But her voice did not sound certain. That night, Mason noticed something strange behind the motel desk. An old map of Route 66. Most mile markers were printed normally, but mile 214 had been covered with black tape. At 11:40 p.m., Mason drove east out of Redwater. The desert was silent. No cars, no wind. Only the hum of his engine and the silver line of the old highway. At exactly midnight, his headlights flickered. The radio filled with static. Then a voice came through. Not a station, not a song. A man's voice, distant and tired. "Do not stop at mile 214. Mason slowed the car. A green mile marker appeared on the shoulder. 214. The road ahead shimmered like heat rising from asphalt, though the desert night was cold. Then he saw it. In the middle of the highway, a square metal hatch stood open, just like the photograph. Mason parked on the shoulder and stepped outside with his camera. The hatch looked old, military maybe. A narrow staircase descended beneath the road. Cold air rose from below, carrying the smell of dust, metal, and rain. Rain in the desert. He aimed his flashlight downward. The stairs seemed to continue farther than they should. Then, from deep below, a light flickered. Mason whispered, "Hello?" No answer. Only the faint sound of an engine starting somewhere underground. Against his better judgment, he climbed down. The tunnel beneath Route 66 was not a cave. It was a road, a second road, wide enough for cars, built of concrete and steel. Old yellow lane lines stretched into darkness. Rusty light fixtures hung from the ceiling. Faded signs pointed toward towns Mason had never heard of. Silver Ridge, Calico West, New Eden. None appeared on any modern map. Mason walked forward slowly, filming everything. Then he heard tires. A car approached from the darkness. It was a blue 1957 Chevrolet, polished and perfect, its headlights glowing softly. The car stopped beside him. Inside sat a woman wearing a red scarf and white gloves. She rolled down the window. "You're late," she said. Mason stepped back. "I'm sorry?" "The convoy leaves at 1. "What convoy?" She looked at him strangely. "The last one." Before Mason could ask more, the car drove away into the tunnel. Mason followed. After several hundred yards, the tunnel opened into an underground town. Neon lights glowed above diners and gas stations. A movie theater displayed a poster from 1962. People walked the sidewalks in clothes from different decades. A soldier from the 1940s, a waitress from the 1950s, a businessman from the 1980s, a teenage girl holding a cassette player. No one seemed surprised to see him. At the center of the town stood a sign, "Welcome to Mercy Stop, last service before the road ends." Mason entered a diner called the Blue Star. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and warm pie. A jukebox played softly in the corner. Behind the counter stood an old waitress named June. She looked at Mason's camera and sighed. "Another one from upstairs." "What is this place?" Mason asked. June poured coffee into a chipped mug. "A waiting room." "For what?" "For people who took the wrong road." She explained that Mercy Stop appeared to travelers who vanished on Route 66. Not all of them died. Some simply disappeared between places. A trucker in a dust storm, a family during a night drive, a musician who missed a turn. The road collected them. The tunnel held them until they were ready to move on. Mason felt his throat tighten. "My grandfather knew this place." June's expression softened. "What was his name?" "Earl Cole." The diner went quiet. A man sitting near the window slowly turned. Gray hair, tired eyes, a denim jacket. Mason recognized him instantly from old photographs. His grandfather, but younger, much younger, maybe 40 years old. The man stood. "Mason?" Mason could barely breathe. "That's impossible." Earl looked down. "I hoped you'd never find the mile marker." Earl told him the truth. In 1968, he had been driving a freight route through the desert when a terrible storm hit. He saw the hatch open on the road. He climbed down, just as Mason had. But he found more than a tunnel. He found a choice. The tunnel showed him a future where his family suffered because of a decision he had not yet made. So Earl used the underground road to change his path. He returned to the surface after only one night. But on the surface, 3 years had passed. His family thought he had abandoned them. He spent the rest of his life trying to repair the damage. "That Polaroid," Mason whispered. "You left it for me?" Earl nodded. "I thought a warning would be enough." A bell rang outside the diner. Everyone stood. June whispered, "The convoy." Mason followed them into the street. Old cars lined up beneath the neon lights. Each carried people who had waited too long. At the far end of the tunnel, massive doors began to open. Beyond them was not darkness. It was sunrise. A golden road stretching into a place Mason could not understand. June smiled sadly. "Some roads don't lead back." Earl turned to Mason. "You need to leave now." "How?" "Find the exit before 1 o'clock. "What happens after 1? "The tunnel chooses where you belong." Mason looked around at the glowing town, at all the lost travelers, at his grandfather's younger face. A part of him wanted to stay, to ask every question, to photograph every corner, to understand how a whole town could exist beneath an American highway. But then he remembered the warning, "Do not go below." Warnings were not meant to satisfy curiosity. They were meant to protect the future. Mason ran back through the tunnel. The lights flickered overhead. The yellow lane lines shifted. Every sign now pointed in different directions. Redwater, Bellport, Ashwood, home. His flashlight died. From behind him came the sound of engines. The convoy was moving. Dozens of headlights appeared in the darkness. Slow, steady, coming closer. Mason kept running. Then he saw the staircase, the open hatch, moonlight above. He climbed as fast as he could. Just as he reached the top, a hand grabbed his wrist. Earl, breathing hard, older now, exactly as Mason remembered from childhood. "Grandpa?" Earl smiled. "The road gave me one more mile." He pushed Mason upward. "Tell the truth kindly." Before Mason could pull him out, the hatch slammed shut. The asphalt became smooth. No seam, no handle, nothing. The road was empty again. Mason woke in his car at sunrise. His camera sat on the passenger seat. Most of the footage was gone. Only one photograph remained. The underground town, Mercy Stop, and in the diner window, his grandfather, waving goodbye. When Mason returned to Redwater, the motel owner looked at him and knew. "You found it." Mason nodded. "Did anyone ever come back?" She looked toward the highway. "Sometimes." "Are they the same?" "No. Usually they come back knowing what roads are for." Mason finished his book 2 years later. He never mentioned the tunnel directly. Instead, he wrote about the forgotten people of Route 66. The drivers, the dreamers, the ones who disappeared into distance and memory. He dedicated the book to Earl Cole, and beneath the dedication, he printed one line: "Some highways take you where you're going. Others show you why you left." Today, travelers still drive the old Mother Road through Arizona. Most pass mile 214 without noticing anything unusual. But sometimes, near midnight, radios fill with static. Headlights flicker, and drivers see something impossible in the center of the road. A square metal hatch, open, waiting. Those who keep driving remember nothing but a strange feeling in their chest, as if they almost took a turn they could never undo. But those who stop, those who climb down, may find an old underground road lined with yellow lights, a diner where coffee is always hot, a town full of people from forgotten decades, and a sign glowing softly above the street. "Welcome to Mercy Stop. Last service before the road ends." So if you ever drive Route 66 after midnight, and your radio whispers your name, do not stop at mile 214, because some roads are not meant to be discovered, and some tunnels only open for people the highway is not ready to let go. The end. The forgotten town hidden behind the mountains. An original mystery story. There are some towns that disappear because people leave. There are others that disappear because maps forget them. But high in the Blue Ridge Mountains, behind a wall of pine forest and morning fog, there was a town that vanished for a stranger reason. No road led to it. No satellite image showed it. No census record listed its name. And yet, every autumn, when the leaves turned red and gold, some travelers claimed they saw chimney smoke rising from behind the mountains. The town was called Alderwick. At least, that was the name written in an old journal found in a Virginia antique shop. The journal belonged to a schoolteacher named Eleanor Price, who vanished in 1934 while traveling through the mountains. For decades, people assumed she had gotten lost during a storm. But inside her journal, on the final page, was a sentence no one could explain. "Alderwick is still here, but the world has stopped looking." 70 years later, a young cartographer named Nora Wells discovered the journal. Nora made maps for a living. She believed the world could be understood if you looked carefully enough. Roads, rivers, borders, elevation lines, everything had a place. Everything could be measured. But the journal bothered her. Eleanor Price had drawn a small map beside the final sentence. A narrow road, 3 mountain peaks, a covered bridge, and beyond it, a town square. Nora checked every modern map. Nothing matched. The road did not exist. The bridge did not exist. Neither did Alderwick. So Nora went looking. She arrived in the mountains in late October. The air smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke. The roads wound through forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. For 2 days, she followed old survey lines and abandoned logging trails. Nothing. Then, on the 3rd evening, her GPS failed. Her compass spun in slow circles. Fog rolled down from the peaks like a curtain, and through the fog, she saw a covered bridge. Old, red, silent, exactly like the one in Eleanor's journal. Nora crossed it on foot. Halfway across, every sound behind her disappeared. No cars, no birds, no wind. Only the soft creak of wood beneath her boots. When she stepped off the other side, the fog lifted. A valley opened before her. And there it was, Alderwick, a small mountain town hidden between 3 peaks. White houses, stone chimneys, a church steeple, a general store, a schoolhouse, smoke rising gently into the evening sky. It looked untouched by time, not abandoned, not ruined, alive. A man at the edge of town greeted her with a lantern. He wore suspenders, a wool coat, and boots covered in mud. "You're not from here," he said. Nora tried to stay calm. "I'm looking for Alderwick." The man smiled faintly. "Then you found it. What year is it?" The smile faded. "In Alderwick?" He looked toward the mountains. "That depends on who you ask." The townspeople watched Nora quietly as she walked through the square. No one seemed surprised by her clothes or her backpack. Children paused their games. An old woman lowered a basket of apples. A shopkeeper turned the sign on his door from open to closed. At the center of town stood a clock tower. Its hands were frozen at exactly 5:06. Beneath the clock, carved into stone, were the words, "We remember what the world forgot." Nora was taken to the town hall, where the mayor, Samuel Hart, listened to her story. When she showed him Eleanor Price's journal, every person in the room became silent. Samuel touched the cover gently. "She made it out." "You knew her?" "She taught our children for 1 winter. That was in 1934. Samuel looked tired. "For you, maybe." He explained that Alderwick had once been an ordinary mountain town. In 1934, a landslide destroyed the only road through the pass. For days, the town was cut off from the outside world. When rescue teams finally searched the area, they found no town, only trees, rocks, empty valley. Alderwick had vanished from every official record. But inside the valley, life continued. Days passed, then years, then decades. Only slowly did the townspeople realize the truth. The world outside had forgotten them, and the valley had become sealed by that forgetting. No one could leave unless they were remembered by someone outside. That was why Eleanor escaped. Her sister never stopped searching. Her name remained spoken. Her face remained in photographs. Her story remained alive. But most people in Alderwick had no one left outside. Their families aged, died, forgot. And as memory faded, the mountains held the town tighter. Nora looked around the room. "So you're trapped here?" Samuel answered gently. "We live here." "That isn't the same thing." No, he said. But after enough years, people stop asking the difference. That night, Nora stayed in the old boarding house. Her room had a quilt, a wooden desk, and a window facing the mountains. There was no electricity, no phone signal, no sound except the wind moving through pine trees. On the desk lay a guest book. Nora opened it and found names from impossible years. Visitors from 1947, 1962, 1963, 1964, 1965. Some stayed one night, some stayed forever. The final name before hers made her freeze. Eleanor Price. Beside it, in faded ink, Eleanor had written, "If you find this place, do not let it remember you more than you remember home." The next morning, Nora tried to leave. She crossed the square, followed the road, found the covered bridge. But when she reached the other side, she was back in Alderwick. She tried again, and again. Each time, the bridge returned her to town. By sunset, she understood. Alderwick had begun remembering her, and if she stayed too long, the outside world might forget. Days passed. Nora searched for answers. She studied old maps in the town hall, interviewed residents, climbed hills to observe the valley from above. But every path curved back. Every ridge led to fog. Every compass failed. The only thing that worked was memory. When Nora focused on her apartment, her mother's voice, the smell of coffee from her favorite cafe, the fog thinned. When she became distracted by Alderwick's quiet beauty, the fog grew thicker. The town did not imprison people with walls. It softened the desire to leave. And Alderwick was beautiful, too beautiful. Every evening, golden light filled the valley. Neighbors gathered in the square. Music drifted from the general store. People shared food. No one rushed. No one stared at screens. No one asked for more than the day offered. For the first time in years, Nora felt peaceful. That was the danger. On her 7th night, the clock tower began ticking. One sound, then another. The entire town stopped moving. Samuel found Nora in the square. "You need to decide soon." "Decide what?" "Whether you belong here." Nora looked at the frozen clock. "What happens at 5:06? Samuel's face darkened. That was the moment the outside world forgot us. And if the clock reaches 5:07, then the town remembers you completely. What does that mean? You stay. Nora ran to the schoolhouse and searched through Eleanor's old classroom. Inside a hidden drawer, she found letters Eleanor had written but never sent. One was addressed to whoever came after her. It read, "The town is not evil. It is lonely. It survives by being remembered. But memory cannot be stolen. It must be given. To leave, you must give Alderwick a memory strong enough to stand on its own." Nora finally understood. Alderwick did not need another prisoner. It needed a witness, someone to carry its story back into the world. The next morning, she gathered the townspeople in the square. She took photographs, wrote down names, recorded stories, births, marriages, songs, recipes, family histories. Every life the world had forgotten. For 3 days and 3 nights, Nora worked without rest. The town changed as she wrote. Colors became sharper. The fog lifted from the mountains. The clock tower ticked louder. Samuel watched her carefully. "You're making us real again." "No," Nora said. "You already were. I'm just making sure the world knows." On the 4th evening, Nora walked to the covered bridge with a satchel full of journals, photographs, and maps. The entire town followed. No one spoke. At the bridge entrance, Samuel handed her a small wooden sign. It had once hung above the town gate, Alderwick. "Take it," he said, "so we are not only a rumor." Nora held it close. Then she stepped onto the bridge. This time, the fog did not stop her. Halfway across, she heard voices behind her, the townspeople, softly calling their own names, remembering themselves. The bridge creaked beneath her, and when Nora reached the other side, she stood on an abandoned mountain road at sunrise. Her phone buzzed. Signal returned. The date showed only 9 days had passed, but Nora felt as if she had carried a century. She searched for the bridge behind her. It was gone. Only trees and fog remained. In her satchel, however, the journals were real. The photographs were real. The wooden Alderwick sign was real. She had proof. But proof is not always enough. When Nora published the story, many people called it fiction. Some said the photographs were staged. Others said the journals were clever forgeries. But families across the country began writing to her, people who recognized names, faces, old stories their grandparents had mentioned once and then forgotten. Slowly, Alderwick returned to memory, not on maps, not officially, but in letters, in family albums, in whispered histories. And sometimes, that is enough. Years later, Nora became famous for mapping forgotten places. But she never found Alderwick again. Every autumn, she returned to the Blue Ridge Mountains and walked the old trails. She never saw the covered bridge, never heard the clock tower, never smelled the wood smoke. But once, on a foggy October morning, she found something on the path, a fresh red apple. Beside it lay a folded note, written in Samuel Hart's careful handwriting. "We are still here. And now, the world is looking." Nora smiled through tears, because some places do not disappear when people leave. They disappear when people stop telling their stories. And high behind the mountains, beyond a bridge that only appears in fog, a small town still waits. White houses, stone chimneys, a clock tower frozen at 5:06, and a sign at the edge of the square that reads, "We remember what the world forgot." So if you ever travel through the Blue Ridge in late October, and your compass begins to spin, and you smell wood smoke where no town should be, listen carefully. You may hear a bell from behind the mountains, not calling you to stay, only asking you to remember. The End. The Road That Never Appeared on Any Map. An original mystery story. Every road in America has a number, a name, a beginning, and an end. Highways are mapped, country roads are surveyed. Even forgotten dirt trails eventually appear on satellite images. But somewhere between Nevada and Utah, there was a road that existed only when someone needed it. No map had ever shown it. No GPS could find it. And those who drove it never forgot the journey. For more than 60 years, truck drivers had shared the same strange story. Late at night, usually after midnight, their GPS would suddenly lose signal. The radio would fill with static. The highway ahead would disappear into thick fog. Then, when the fog cleared, another road would appear beside the one they had been driving. A perfectly smooth two-lane highway stretching into darkness. No road signs, no lane markers, no traffic. Only a single wooden sign at the entrance. It always read the same words: Last Chance Road. Most drivers never turned. A few did, and none of them could explain where the road went. Daniel Mercer was not interested in ghost stories. He was 34 years old, a transportation surveyor who spent his life mapping remote highways across the western United States. He trusted measurements, coordinates, satellite data, not legends. When an old truck driver told him about Last Chance Road at a roadside diner outside Ely, Nevada, Daniel smiled politely. Every driver has a story. The old man nodded. Yes, but not every story leaves tire tracks. Before leaving, the driver slid a folded photograph across the table. It showed an empty desert highway beneath a full moon. Beside the road stood a weathered wooden sign, Last Chance Road. On the back was written, "If you find it, don't drive faster than 40 miles per hour." Daniel laughed. Then he packed the photograph into his notebook. 3 nights later, he found himself driving the exact stretch of highway the old man had mentioned. It was almost midnight. The desert stretched endlessly beneath the stars. The only sounds were the tires and the wind. Then his GPS screen went black. His dashboard clock froze. 12 o'clock. The radio hissed with static. And ahead, fog rolled across the highway. Deserts don't make fog, yet there it was. When the mist drifted aside, another road appeared, running perfectly parallel to the highway. A wooden sign stood at its entrance, exactly like the photograph. Last Chance Road. Daniel should have kept driving. Instead, he turned. The moment his tires crossed onto the new road, everything became strangely quiet. The engine still ran, but the wind disappeared. The stars overhead looked brighter. The air felt warmer. His speedometer settled exactly at 40 miles per hour. When he tried to accelerate, the needle refused to move. 10 miles later, Daniel noticed something impossible. Cars were parked beside the road, dozens of them. A 1948 Ford, a 1967 Mustang, a 1985 pickup truck, a modern electric SUV. Vehicles from different decades, all perfectly clean, all empty. Their headlights glowed softly, though none of them were running. Soon, lights appeared ahead. Not a town, not exactly. It looked like a roadside rest stop from another era. An old gas station, a diner, a motel, a repair garage. Neon signs buzzed gently. Everything looked frozen somewhere between the 1950s and today. Daniel parked. Inside the diner, people sat quietly drinking coffee. A waitress smiled as if she had been expecting him. "You're right on time." Daniel frowned. "What place is this?" The waitress poured fresh coffee. "This is where people stop before choosing." "Choosing what?" She looked toward the highway outside. The road they really want. No one inside the diner seemed surprised by Daniel. A young soldier polished dusty boots. An elderly woman knitted quietly by the window. A teenage boy stared at an old road map. Each person wore clothes from a different decade. Daniel sat beside the soldier. "How long have you been here?" The man smiled. "Depends who's counting." "What year is it?" The soldier thought for a moment. "For me? 1945. Daniel slowly stood up. Behind the diner hung a giant map of the United States. But the map kept changing. Roads moved. Cities shifted. Some places disappeared completely. The waitress noticed Daniel watching. "That's not a map." "What is it?" "Possibilities." She explained that Last Chance Road appeared only to people standing at the biggest crossroads of their lives. Some were about to make terrible mistakes. Some had already made them. Others simply needed to remember where they were trying to go before life distracted them. The road did not predict the future. It showed forgotten directions.
Daniel laughed nervously. "So this is some kind of dream?" The waitress smiled. "If it helps." She handed him an old brass motel key. "Room 7. Your answer is waiting upstairs." The motel hallway was silent. Room 7 looked ordinary. A bed, a chair, a desk, a mirror. But the wall opposite the window held hundreds of photographs. Each showed Daniel. Different ages, different lives. One photo showed him teaching children. Another showed him living in Alaska. One showed him standing beside a woman and 2 children. Another showed him alone in a city apartment. Every photograph captured a life he had never lived. On the desk lay a leather journal. Its first page read, "Every road not taken leaves a map behind." The entries were written by different versions of Daniel. One regretted chasing promotions instead of family. Another regretted never leaving home. Another regretted never forgiving his brother. Each life carried joy. Each carried loss. There was no perfect road, only different destinations. A knock came at the door. Daniel opened it. Standing outside was a man who looked exactly like him, only older, gray hair, weathered face, kind eyes. The older Daniel smiled. "You finally found the road." The older man explained that he had once stood at the same crossroads. Years earlier, he had chosen ambition over everything else. Money, recognition, endless travel. He achieved every goal. But somewhere along the way, he forgot why he started. "When I found this road," the older Daniel said, "I realized I had spent my life reaching destinations I never actually wanted." Daniel whispered, "Are you real?" The older version laughed. "Real enough to warn you." Outside, a deep horn echoed across the desert. The waitress entered quietly. "Time to leave. What happens if I stay?" She looked at him sadly. "You'll keep exploring roads. For how long? Until curiosity replaces living." Daniel looked through the motel window. Beyond the rest stop stretched hundreds of highways, each disappearing into a different horizon, each offering another possibility, another life, another chance. It was beautiful and dangerous, because every new road promised something better. None promised peace. Daniel returned to his truck. The waitress handed him one final envelope. "Don't open it until sunrise." He nodded. The old soldier saluted. The elderly woman smiled. The teenage boy folded his map. Everyone returned to what they had been doing, as though travelers came and went every night. Daniel started the engine. The speedometer still refused to rise above 40. When he reached the wooden sign again, fog swallowed the road. Moments later, he was back on the empty highway. His GPS restarted. The dashboard clock read 12:01. Only 1 minute had passed.
At sunrise, Daniel stopped beside a desert overlook. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet. It contained only one map. Not of highways, not of America. It was a map of his own life. The important places were marked: his childhood home, his mother's grave, his brother's farm, the school where he once wanted to teach, the lake where he proposed to the woman he almost married. And beneath the map were 6 words: "Go where your heart remembers." Daniel resigned from his surveying job 2 months later, not because maps were unimportant, but because he finally understood what maps could never measure. He repaired his relationship with his younger brother. He began teaching geography at a community college. He traveled less, laughed more, and every year he took one long road trip with no destination. Not to find Last Chance Road again,
but to remember that every journey begins with a choice. Years passed. Daniel never saw the mysterious road again. He often wondered if he had imagined everything. Until one autumn evening, while cleaning his garage, he found something inside the glove compartment of his old truck. The brass motel key. Room 7. It had no motel name, no number except a tiny engraving. 40. The speed limit he could never exceed. Today, truck drivers still tell stories about a strange road somewhere between Nevada and Utah. Most people dismiss them. Fog in the desert, late-night exhaustion, overactive imaginations. But a few experienced drivers always give the same advice. If your GPS dies after midnight, if the radio goes silent, and you see a weathered wooden sign beside a perfect empty road, don't be afraid, but don't rush. 40 miles per hour is enough. Because some roads are not built to take you somewhere new. Some roads exist only to remind you where you were always meant to go. And perhaps somewhere beneath a sky full of stars, Last Chance Road is still waiting. Not for lost travelers, but for people who have forgotten that the longest journey in life is often the one back to themselves. The end.
The Island That Returned After 80 Years, an original mystery story. The Atlantic Ocean keeps many secrets. Sunken ships, forgotten cities, storms that erased entire coastlines. But off the coast of Maine, sailors spoke of one mystery that seemed impossible. An island that disappeared in 1943 and returned exactly 80 years later. It wasn't a legend told to frighten children. It appeared in Coast Guard records, old navigation charts, lighthouse journals, even weather reports. One day, Blackwood Island simply vanished beneath the sea. No explosion, no earthquake, no tidal wave. By sunrise, the island was gone. Every lighthouse keeper, fisherman, and naval officer who searched for it found only open water. Then, on the morning of October 3rd, 2023, satellite images captured something extraordinary. Blackwood Island was back, exactly where it had once been. Marine archaeologist Olivia Carter first heard the news while working in Boston Harbor. Most people assumed the satellite images were an error. Olivia didn't. She had spent 15 years studying lost settlements buried beneath oceans and rivers. She knew coastlines changed, sandbars moved, but entire islands did not simply disappear and return. When she received permission to join the first research expedition, she accepted without hesitation. 3 days later, her boat crossed calm gray water toward the island. From a distance, Blackwood looked untouched by time. Steep cliffs, dense pine forest, a white lighthouse standing proudly on the northern point. No signs of erosion, no modern buildings. It looked as though 1943 had never ended. The expedition included 6 people: Olivia, a geologist, a photographer, 2 Coast Guard officers, and Professor Henry Lowell, an 87-year-old historian. Henry had a personal reason for coming. His father had lived on Blackwood Island before it vanished. As a child, Henry remembered watching the evacuation boats leave. Everyone reached the mainland, except one person, the lighthouse keeper, Elias Mercer. He refused to abandon the light. The last radio message from the island contained only one sentence: "The fog is coming back." Then, silence. As the research boat approached the dock, Olivia noticed something strange. The wooden pier looked freshly repaired. Flowers bloomed beside the path. A fishing net hung outside one cottage. It felt lived in. Yet no smoke rose from chimneys. No boats floated in the harbor. No voices carried through the trees. The island was perfectly quiet. The expedition split into pairs. Olivia walked toward the lighthouse with Henry. The old path was lined with stone fences and apple trees. Many of the apples had fallen to the ground. None had rotted. Henry stopped beside a mailbox. His hands trembled. My father's name. The mailbox still carried the faded words, Lowell family. It looked as though someone had painted the letters yesterday. Inside the lighthouse, everything remained exactly as described in government records from 1943. An oil lantern, navigation charts, a wooden desk, a cup of cold tea. The calendar on the wall still showed October 1943. Olivia slowly turned the pages. Every date after October 3rd was blank, as though time itself had stopped. The lighthouse logbook lay open. The final entries belonged to Elias Mercer. October 1st. Fog moving in from the east. October 2nd. The radio keeps repeating tomorrow's weather. October 3rd. The island no longer appears on the mainland map. Then, one last unfinished sentence. If anyone finds this, nothing more. That evening, heavy fog surrounded Blackwood Island. The research team decided to remain overnight. At exactly 8:14 p.m., every compass stopped working. GPS signals disappeared. Satellite phones went silent. The lighthouse lantern, which no one had lit, suddenly began glowing. Soft golden light swept across the sea. Henry whispered, "My father said the lighthouse never went dark." Later that night, Olivia woke to the sound of footsteps outside. She stepped onto the porch. The fog covered everything beyond a few feet. Then, she saw people walking along the path. A fisherman carrying nets, a young woman holding flowers, children chasing one another. None of them looked toward Olivia. They walked silently through the fog, then vanished. The next morning, no footprints remained. Professor Henry made another discovery. Inside the old schoolhouse, every student's notebook remained on their desks. One belonged to a girl named Lucy Mercer, the lighthouse keeper's daughter. Her final assignment read, "Describe your home." Lucy had written, "Father says islands can drift in ways people cannot see. He says sometimes they become lost before anyone notices. If Blackwood disappears, maybe we are not gone. Maybe everyone else is." Olivia read the words twice, then closed the notebook slowly. The geologist reported something impossible. The island's bedrock showed no signs of ever being underwater. It had not risen from the sea. It had simply returned, as though it had been somewhere else all along. That afternoon, Olivia climbed the lighthouse tower alone. At the very top, beneath the lantern room, she discovered a hidden compartment. Inside rested dozens of unopened letters, each addressed to families on the mainland. The oldest dated October 1943. The newest, October 2023. One envelope bore Olivia's own name. She stared at it in disbelief. No one on the island could have known she would come. Yet there it was, written in faded ink, Olivia Carter. Inside was a letter from Elias Mercer. "If you are reading this, then the island has returned. You will wonder where we have been. The answer is simple. We never moved. Time did." Olivia felt a chill. The letter continued. "When the great fog arrived,
Blackwood slipped between two tides, not tides of water, tides of years. To us, only a few days have passed. To the mainland, decades. That night, the fog returned thicker than before. This time, voices came with it. Not whispers, ordinary conversations, doors closing, dogs barking, church bells ringing. An entire town seemed alive beyond the mist. Olivia followed the sounds into the center of the village. Suddenly, the fog lifted. Blackwood was no longer empty. People filled the streets. Children laughed. Fishermen unloaded boats. Women swept porches. The general store stood open. Everyone moved naturally, as though it were still 1943. No one seemed surprised to see Olivia. An elderly woman smiled. "You're early." "What year is this?" Olivia asked. The woman laughed gently. 1943, of course. Olivia looked around desperately. She found Elias Mercer standing outside the lighthouse. Alive, young, calm. He looked toward her as if he had expected her arrival for years, or minutes. "You crossed the fog," Elias said. Olivia nodded. "I read your letter." Elias smiled. "Then you already know." He explained that every 80 years, for one single night, Blackwood touched the ordinary world again. Just long enough for someone to remember it. Then the fog returned. The island slipped away, waiting another 80 years. "But why?" Olivia asked. Elias looked toward the ocean. Long ago, the island chose to protect something. What? He simply pointed beneath the lighthouse. Together they descended into an underground chamber. Inside stood shelves filled with journals, maps, scientific records, family histories, paintings, music, and thousands of handwritten stories. The entire memory of Blackwood Island. "We knew one day storms, war, or time would erase us," Elias said. "So we preserved ourselves, not our buildings, our lives." Olivia understood. Blackwood had not survived because of magic. It survived because memory had refused to disappear. The fog was not a prison. It was protection. Midnight approached. The fog thickened again. Elias handed Olivia one final journal. "Our history. Take it. If someone remembers us, we never truly vanish." Olivia wanted to stay, to ask more questions, to understand everything. But the lighthouse bell rang once. The village slowly faded. People smiled as though saying goodbye. Children waved. Lucy closed her notebook. Elias lit the lantern one final time. The island isn't returning. It's leaving. Olivia woke aboard the research boat. Morning sunlight reflected across calm water. The crew searched the horizon in confusion. Blackwood Island had disappeared. Only open ocean stretched in every direction. The GPS worked again. Compasses pointed north. Everything seemed ordinary, except for one thing. The journal still rested in Olivia's hands. Scientists spent years trying to explain the event. Most concluded the satellite images had been misinterpreted. Some claimed the expedition had drifted onto another island. Others dismissed the entire story. But Professor Henry knew better. Because among the pages Olivia carried home was a family photograph. His father stood beside the lighthouse, smiling, holding baby Henry. A photograph that had never existed before. Olivia published the journal exactly as she found it. Not as proof, as remembrance. Families discovered names of forgotten relatives. Old songs returned. Recipes once thought lost were cooked again.
Blackwood Island slowly reappeared, not on maps, but in memory. Every October, fishermen still sail past the empty stretch of ocean where the island once stood. Most see only waves, but some mornings, when fog rolls quietly across the Atlantic, they notice something impossible: a distant lighthouse, one slow beam turning across the water, 3 gentle bell chimes carried by the wind. And for just a moment, they smell fresh bread baking, hear children laughing, see smoke rising from chimneys that should not exist. Then the fog lifts, the sea becomes empty once more. Olivia never returned to Blackwood. She knew she could not. The island had already given her what it wanted the world to keep: its story. Because places do not truly disappear when they sink beneath water. They disappear when no one remembers they were ever there. And somewhere beyond ordinary time, hidden behind a wall of silver fog, Blackwood Island still waits. The lighthouse still burns. The apple trees still bloom. The school bell still rings. Waiting for another 80 years. Waiting for another traveler. Waiting for someone who still remembers. The end. The radio that broadcast tomorrow's news. An original mystery story. In the attic of a quiet house in Oregon, beneath a sheet of dust and beside 3 boxes of old Christmas decorations, there sat a wooden radio. It was large, heavy, and old enough to look like a piece of furniture. Its dials were brass. Its speaker was covered with brown cloth. And carved into the back, almost too faint to read, were 4 words: "Do not tune past midnight." Most people would have thrown it away, but Noah Mercer was not most people. He repaired old things for a living: pocket watches, typewriters, film cameras, record players, anything forgotten by time. So when he found the radio inside his late grandfather's attic, he carried it downstairs, cleaned the dust from the cabinet, and plugged it in. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the speaker crackled. A warm hiss filled the room. Noah smiled. The old radio was alive. At first, it picked up ordinary stations: jazz, weather reports, late-night talk shows, static from distant cities. Noah turned the dial slowly, enjoying the sound of another era. Then, at exactly midnight, the radio changed. The lights in the house flickered. The air grew cold, and a calm news announcer's voice came through the speaker. "This is KBR 77 with tomorrow morning's headlines." Noah laughed quietly. Some strange rebroadcast, maybe an old recording. But then the announcer continued. "Local bridge closure expected after early morning accident on Route 9. Noah froze. Route 9 was 5 miles away. The bridge was open. No accident had happened. Not yet. The next morning, while driving to work, Noah saw flashing lights ahead. The bridge was closed. A delivery truck had skidded on wet pavement at dawn. No one was seriously hurt. But the headline had been real. The radio had reported it before it happened. That night, Noah waited beside the radio. At exactly midnight, the broadcast returned. "This is KBR 77 with tomorrow morning's headlines." The announcer's voice was smooth, professional, emotionless. It reported a fire at a bakery, a missing dog found near the river, a city council resignation, a thunderstorm arriving by late afternoon. The next day, every single story came true. Noah stopped sleeping normally after that. Each night, he sat in the dim living room with a notebook in his lap, writing down tomorrow's news. At first, the headlines were harmless: weather, traffic, local events, small things. But soon, the stories became serious. A house fire, a highway pileup, a child lost in the woods. Noah realized he could help, so he began making calls. Anonymous warnings, careful messages, a tip to the fire department, a call to a school office. A note left at a police station. Sometimes it worked. The bakery checked its ovens and prevented the fire. A family delayed a road trip and avoided the crash. Searchers found the child before sunset. The next night, the radio updated the news. The disasters disappeared from the broadcast. At first, Noah felt like a hero. Quiet, invisible, necessary. But the radio had rules. Noah learned them slowly. If he changed one headline, another appeared. If he prevented one accident, some other event became worse. A fire that never happened became a flood 2 streets away. A man saved from a crash later collapsed at home. A lost child rescued in the forest meant an elderly hiker went missing instead. Noah filled notebook after notebook, trying to understand the pattern. The future was not a wall. It was water. Push it in one place, and it rose somewhere else. One night, the broadcast began differently. No music, no station identification, only static. Then the announcer said, "Correction." Noah leaned closer. The voice continued. "Previous timeline invalid." The room went cold. Then came the next headline. Local restorer Noah Mercer found dead in house fire after electrical malfunction. Noah dropped his pencil. The radio kept speaking. Time of incident, 3:17 a.m. He looked at the clock, 12:06. He had just over 3 hours. Noah unplugged every appliance, checked every outlet, removed the radio from the wall, opened windows, turned off the breaker. Then he drove across town and slept in his truck outside a grocery store. At 3:17 a.m., his phone rang. It was his neighbor. "Noah, your house is on fire." By sunrise, the living room was gone. The fire chief blamed old wiring. No one was hurt. But when Noah returned to the house, the radio was sitting untouched on the front porch. Not burned, not even warm. Its cord was wrapped neatly around the back. A slip of paper was tucked beneath the dial. It read, "You cannot cancel the news." Noah should have destroyed it. Instead, he took it to his workshop. He told himself he only wanted to study it. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was afraid not to listen. At midnight, the broadcast returned. The announcer's voice sounded closer than before. "This is KBR 77, reporting from tomorrow." Then came the headline that changed everything. Mayor Evelyn Carter expected to disappear during charity gala. Noah knew Evelyn. Everyone in town did. She was kind, careful, and beloved. The gala was scheduled for the next night. Noah sent an anonymous warning, then another. Then he called the event venue and claimed there was a security risk. The gala was nearly canceled, but Evelyn insisted on attending. Noah went too. At 9:42 p.m., the lights in the ballroom flickered. For 3 seconds, the room went dark. When they came back on, Mayor Evelyn Carter was gone. Her purse remained on her chair. Her coat hung in the lobby. Security cameras showed static during the blackout. No one saw her leave. The next night, the radio announced, "Mayor Carter disappearance remains unexplained." Then, after a long pause, the announcer added, "Witness Noah Mercer failed to prevent event." Noah's blood turned cold. The radio knew him. He began researching KBR 77. No such station existed. No license. No archived broadcasts. No old call sign. Nothing. Then he searched his grandfather's papers. At the bottom of a locked drawer, he found a photograph from 1958. His grandfather stood beside the same radio. On the back was written, "The first broadcast was not meant for us." Inside the drawer was also a journal. The entries revealed that Noah's grandfather had heard tomorrow's news too. For years, he had tried to prevent tragedies. And just like Noah, he discovered the pattern. Every changed headline created another. Every rescue moved the cost somewhere else. The final page contained a warning. The announcer is not predicting the future. It is editing it. That sentence haunted Noah. If the radio was not warning him, what was it doing? The answer came 3 nights later. At midnight, the radio turned on by itself. The announcer said, "Special report." Static filled the room. Then a new voice came through. A woman, weak, distant. Noah? It was Mayor Evelyn Carter. Noah grabbed the radio. "Evelyn, where are you?" "I don't know." "What happened?" The room went dark. "I heard the news." A long silence followed. Then Evelyn whispered, "It collects the stories." "What does?" "The station." The signal cracked. Evelyn continued, "Every event you change has to go somewhere." "Where?" Her voice trembled. "Here." The broadcast ended. Noah sat frozen until morning. Then he understood. The radio was not preventing disasters. It was moving them into another place, another layer of time, a hidden station where unfinished headlines accumulated. People who vanished, events that never happened, lives removed from one version of the world and trapped in another. His grandfather had known, and now Noah had to finish what he could not. The next midnight, Noah tuned the dial slowly, past the normal stations, past static, past the point where the warning said not to tune. The room lights flickered. The radio cabinet began humming. The brass dial grew warm. Then the announcer's voice returned. "You are not authorized to access this frequency." Noah kept turning. The walls stretched. The floor vibrated. The radio speaker glowed with pale blue light. Suddenly, the room disappeared. Noah found himself standing inside a radio station, an old newsroom, desks covered with paper, microphones hanging from metal arms, clocks on every wall. Each clock showed a different tomorrow. At the center sat a man in a dark suit reading from a script. The announcer. He looked up calmly. "You should not be here." Behind him were shelves filled with newspapers, millions of them. Each front page carried a headline that had been changed. A fire avoided, a crash prevented, a disappearance delayed, a death rewritten. And between the shelves wandered people who should have been in those stories. Evelyn Carter stood among them, alive, confused, waiting. Noah stepped forward. "Let them go." The announcer folded his script. "You misunderstand. I maintain balance." "No," Noah said. "You steal endings." The announcer smiled faintly. "Humans beg to know tomorrow. Then they resent the cost." Noah saw his grandfather's name on a stack of old broadcasts. He realized the radio had passed through his family because they kept listening, kept interfering, kept feeding the station with altered futures. The only way to stop it was not to fix tomorrow. It was to stop receiving it. Noah grabbed the master script from the announcer's desk. The announcer's calm face finally changed. "Do not do that." Noah looked down. The script contained tomorrow's biggest headline. "Noah Mercer fails to return." He smiled sadly. Then he tore the script in half. The station shook. Every clock shattered at once. Newspapers flew from the shelves like birds. The announcer's voice dissolved into static. Evelyn ran toward Noah. "What did you do?" He answered, canceled the broadcast. A bright white sound filled everything. Noah woke in his workshop at sunrise. The radio sat on the table, silent.
Its wooden cabinet had cracked down the middle. On the floor beside it lay a newspaper, today's newspaper, not tomorrow's. The headline read, "Mayor Evelyn Carter found safe after missing night." Noah exhaled. For the first time in months, the future had arrived the ordinary way, one moment at a time. The radio never worked again. Experts examined it and found nothing unusual except impossible age in some of its wiring. Noah placed it in a glass case in his shop, not for sale, not for repair, only as a reminder. Beside it, he displayed a small brass plaque. Some news is not meant to arrive early. Years later, people still visited Noah's workshop to see the famous broken radio. Most thought it was just an old family story, a clever myth. But every so often, late at night when the shop was closed, someone passing by heard static from behind the glass. Then, a calm announcer's voice would begin. "This is KBR 77. But it never finished the sentence, because Noah had removed the tuning dial. And without the dial, tomorrow had no way in. Some futures are meant to surprise us. Some warnings are meant to be missed. And some days can only be lived honestly when we do not know how they will end. The end.